The marble floors of Le Jardin gleamed under the soft afternoon light filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows. Located in the heart of downtown San Francisco, this wasn't just any restaurant, it was the kind of place where deals worth millions, where sealed overaged wine and conversations held in hushed tones carried more weight than signed contracts. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across pristine white tablecloths, and the air carried hints of truffle oil and fresh rosemary from the kitchen. Marina Castellanos moved through this world of privilege with practiced grace. Her movements, fluid as water, her presence somehow both visible and invisible, the mark of truly exceptional service. 28. She had the kind of quiet beauty that didn't demand attention, but rewarded those who looked closely enough to notice. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, not a strand out of place despite the lunch rush. Her uniform was immaculate, pressed to perfection, and her smile was the kind that could either warm your heart or, if you were paying attention, warn you that there was far more to her than met the eye. The storm that would change everything began with the softest whisper of expensive leather against marble. Alexander Volkov entered Le Jardin like he owned it, which, given his net worth of $3.2 billion, he probably could have. The Russian tech mogul commanded attention without trying, his presence filling the doorway before his 6'3" frame even crossed the threshold. His suit was charcoal gray, tailored to perfection by someone whose name you'd only know if you moved in circles where money wasn't discussed because everyone had too much of it. His steel gray eyes swept the room with the calculating precision of a predator. Surveying territory behind him trailed two men, his business partner, Viktor Petrov, younger, hungrier, trying too hard in his designer suit, and a translator named James, whose nervous energy suggested he knew this lunch would be anything but ordinary. Marina approached their table, the best one, naturally overlooking the city skyline with her notepad ready and her expression professionally neutral. She had served countless wealthy patrons, each convinced their money made them special, each blind to the fact that she had seen their type 1,000 times before. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. Welcome to Le Jardin. My name's Marina, and I'll be taking care of you today." Her voice was warm honey, smooth and inviting, giving nothing away. Alexander barely glanced at her, or its fingers were already dancing across his phone screen, probably moving millions with each swipe. When he finally looked up, his gaze moved through her rather than to her, as if she were made of glass. "Vodka," he said, in heavily accented English. "The best you have. Temperature must be exactly -18 degrees Celsius." He turned to Victor and switched to Russian, his voice dropping to a dismissive rumble. "Americans don't know how to serve vodka properly. They think cold means from the freezer." Victor laughed, the sound sharp and mean. He replied in Russian, tilting his head toward Marina. "Look at her. I bet she doesn't even know what Celsius is. These waitresses here, pretty but empty, like Matryoshka dolls with no inner dolls." Marina's hand didn't pause as she wrote down the order. Her face remained placid, professional. But inside, something ancient stirred. Not anger exactly, but something older, deeper. Recognition. "And for you, sir?" she asked Victor, her tone unchanged.
Same.
Victor said in English, then added in Russian to Alexander, "Though why waste good vodka in a place like this? She'll probably bring us something from a plastic bottle and think we won't notice." James, the translator, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He understood every word, of course, but his job was to translate business, not casual cruelty. His eyes met Marina's for just a moment, and she saw the apology there, the second-hand shame. "I'll have water, please," James said quietly in English. "With lemon, if you have it." "Of course," Marina replied, gracing him with a genuine smile that made him blink in surprise. "I'll have those drinks right out for you." As she turned to leave, Alexander's voice followed her in Russian, loud enough that he clearly didn't care. Who heard, confident that no one would understand. Look how she walks, like she's important. Like? We should be grateful she condescended to take our order. Marina's step didn't falter, but her jaw tightened imperceptibly. She made her way to the bar where Tommy, the bartender who'd worked there even longer than she had, was already pulling out the premium vodka. The Russian gentleman? Tommy asked, having served enough wealthy Eastern Europeans to recognize the type. Ha, Marina murmured, checking the freezer temperature. -18 exactly. Tommy whistled low. Particular, isn't he? You have no idea, Marina said, and something in her tone made Tommy look at her more closely. You okay, Mari? She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Just another day in paradise, Tommy. But it wasn't just another day. The threads of fate were already weaving themselves into something larger. Something that would strip away all pretense and reveal truths that Alexander Volkov, in all his billions, had never bothered to learn. Marina returned with the drinks. Balanced perfectly on her tray, the vodka served in crystal glasses that caught the light like liquid diamonds. The temperature was exactly -18 degrees Celsius. She had made sure of it. Not because Alexander deserved such precision, but because Marina never did anything halfway. Your vodka, gentlemen, she said, placing the glasses with practiced elegance, served at exactly -18 degrees, as requested. Alexander picked up his glass without acknowledgement, holding it to the light as if searching for imperfections. He took a sip, and Marina caught the slight widening of his eyes' surprise that it was actually perfect. He said curtly in Russian, then caught himself and switched to English. Menu? Marina handed them the leather-bound menus, each one a small work of art with golden-bossed lettering. Today's special is a pan-seared duck breast with cherry reduction. Served with, "We'll order when ready." Alexander cut her off. Not even looking up from his phone, Victor leaned back in his chair, openly appraising Marina, now with the kind of gaze that made her skin crawl. He said something to Alexander in Russian that made even James, the translator, flush with discomfort. Pretty for an American. I wonder how much tip we need to leave for her to smile for real. Or maybe offer her a real job. The implications in his tone were unmistakable. Alexander chuckled, a sound devoid of warmth. Alexander replied in Russian. She's not the type who deserves a real job. Look at her. She was born for this, serving people like us. Some people build empires, others bring them drinks. It's the natural order. Marina stood there, her face a mask of professional patience, but inside, memories cascaded through her mind like falling dominoes. Her grandmother's voice, strong and clear despite her age, teaching her Russian lullabies. The smell of borscht simmering on the stove in their small Moscow apartment. The years of struggle, of hiding, of running. The reasons they had to leave. The reasons she never spoke about her past. I'll give you gentlemen a few more minutes to decide, she said evenly, but as she turned, she caught James's eye again. This time, she held his gaze just long enough for him to see something. Their knowledge, understanding, warning. His eyes widened slightly, and he quickly looked down at his menu, at the service station. Marina steadied herself against the counter. Her friend and fellow server, David Chen, noticed her tension. "Table 7 giving you trouble?" he asked quietly. "Nothing I can't handle," Marina replied, but her hands were clenched. "Want me to take over?" "No." The word came out sharper than intended. She softened her tone. "No, thank you. This one's mine." David studied her for a moment. In the 2 years they'd worked together, he'd never seen Marina rattled by a customer. "You sure you're okay?" Marina straightened, squaring her shoulders. "Actually, David, I'm perfect. Sometimes the universe delivers exactly what you need, exactly when you need it. When she returned to the table, the three men had their menus closed. Alexander was deep in discussion with Victor about some acquisition. The numbers they threw around, casual enough to buy small countries. 100 million here, 50 million there, all discussed with the same enthusiasm most people reserved for grocery lists, ready to order. Marina asked, pen poised. Alexander didn't pause his conversation. He simply held up two fingers without looking at her and continued talking in Russian about how Americans were too emotional in business, too concerned with feelings rather than results. Marina waited. 30 seconds, a minute. Other tables were beginning to notice the strange tableau, the waitress standing perfectly still, waiting while the men ignored her completely. Finally, Victor laughed at something Alexander said and turned to Marina. "We'll have—" "Excuse me," Marina interrupted, her voice still pleasant, but with an edge of steel. "I believe this gentleman was ordering?" She looked directly at Alexander. The table went silent. Alexander slowly turned his head to look at her, his gray eyes narrowing. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees. He asked Victor in Russian. "What did she say?" "She wants you to order yourself," Victor replied in Russian, smirking. "The little waitress thinks she can teach us manners." Alexander's face darkened. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper in Russian. "Tell this woman that if she wants to keep her job, she should learn to be quiet and listen. I've seen people fired for less." James cleared his throat. "Mr. Volkov would like to order the—" "I heard what Mr. Volkov said," Marina replied calmly, still looking directly at Alexander. Every word. The words hung in the air like a challenge. James's water glass stopped halfway to his lips. Victor's smirk began to fade. But Alexander's face was a study in disbelief, slowly morphing into something else, uncertainty. Perhaps, or the first flicker of fear. "You speak Russian?" James asked in English, his voice barely above a whisper. Marina didn't answer him. Instead, she looked directly at Alexander and spoke in perfect, flawless Russian, not the Russian of language apps or university courses, but the Russian of someone who had lived it, breathed it, bled it. "Yes, I speak Russian. And I heard every word you've said since you sat at this table." The silence that followed was deafening. Alexander's mouth opened, then closed, like a fish suddenly pulled from water. Victor's face had gone pale. James looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair, but Marina wasn't finished. Not even close. She set down her notepad with deliberate calm, the soft thud somehow thunderous in the quiet restaurant. Several nearby tables had noticed the tension, conversations trailing off as people sensed something momentous happening. Marina continued in Russian, her voice carrying clearly across the now hushed dining room. "You think money gives you the right to treat people like furniture, that your billions mean you can talk about people as if they don't exist." Alexander's hand tightened around his vodka glass. "How dare you?" Marina switched to English so the entire restaurant could understand. "How dare I?" "No, Mr. Volkov. How dare you?" She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down, a move so bold, so unexpected, that even David, watching from across the room, gasped. In the rigid hierarchy of fine dining, a server sitting at a customer's table uninvited was unthinkable. "Let me tell you something about the natural order you mentioned," Marina said, her voice steady but charged with emotion. "My grandmother worked in a factory in Novosibirsk for 40 years. Her hands were so damaged from the work that she couldn't hold a pencil by the end, but she made sure my mother could go to university. My mother was a doctor, a brilliant surgeon, till we had to leave Russia because my father spoke out against the wrong people." Alexander's eyes flickered with something recognition, perhaps, or the dawning realization that he had severely miscalculated. Marina continued, "We came to America with nothing. nothing but the clothes on our backs and the language in our hearts. My mother, who had saved lives in Moscow's best hospitals, cleaned offices at night while studying to pass her medical boards, again in English. I was 8 years old, translating for her at the grocery store, watching grown men treat her like she was stupid because she had an accent. Victor shifted uncomfortably. We didn't mean. Yes, you did, Marina cut him off. You meant every word. 'Cause you've never had to earn respect, you've only had to buy it. You've never had to prove your worth, you just inherited it, or stole it, or built it on the backs of people you consider. Beneath you, the restaurant manager, Mr. Harrison, had appeared at the edge of the scene, but he didn't intervene. Something in Marina's bearing, in the raw truth of her words, held him back. You want to know what I see when I look at you, Marina? Asked Alexander directly. I see my Uncle Mikhail. Same arrogance, same belief that money equals worth. He collaborated with the people who forced us to flee. He got rich while families like mine lost everything. And you know what happened to him? He died alone in his mansion, surrounded by his money, with no one who actually cared about him as a person. Alexander's face had gone from red to white. Cat, you don't know anything about me. What? Know enough, Marina replied. I know you're the kind of man who speaks in Russian, assuming the stupid American waitress won't understand. I know you measure people's worth by their bank accounts. I know you've never had someone stand up to you because everyone around you is either bought or scared. She stood up, smoothing her apron. But I'm neither. I'm a waitress, yes. I serve food and drinks to people like you every day. But I'm also the daughter of Dr. Alina Castellanova, who had to become Ellen Castellanos to fit into your America. I'm the granddaughter of Svetlana Mikhailovna, who taught me that dignity isn't something you can buy or sell, something you carry in your spine. James had his head in his hands. Victor was staring at Marina as if seeing her for the first time, but Alexander. Alexander looked like a man watching his carefully constructed worldview crumble. Your Russian is perfect, he said quietly, almost to himself. It should be, Marina replied. It's my mother tongue, the language I dream in, the language my grandmother sang to me in, the language that connects me to a homeland I can never return to because of men like you men who think power is about stepping on others rather than lifting them up. The surrounding tables were absolutely silent now. A woman at table 3 was discreetly wiping tears from her eyes. A businessman at the bar had put down his phone, completely absorbed in the scene. Marina picked up her notepad again. Now, would you like to order? Or would you prefer to continue discussing my inadequacies in a language you assumed I couldn't understand? Alexander opened his mouth, closed it, then said in English, The duck? I'll have the duck special. Excellent choice, Marina said, as if the last 5 minutes hadn't happened. She turned to Victor. And for you? Victor mumbled something about the salmon, his earlier bravado completely deflated. And you already have your water, she said to James with genuine warmth. But would you like to order some food as well? James looked up at her with something approaching awe. The Caesar salad, please. Coming right up, Marina said, and walked away with the same grace she'd maintained throughout, leaving behind a table of men who looked like they'd been hit by a hurricane they never saw coming. In the kitchen, the entire staff had been watching through the service window. When Marina pushed through the doors, they burst into spontaneous applause. The head chef, Marcus, a giant of a man who rarely showed emotion, had tears in his eyes. In 15 years, he said, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen happen in my restaurant. But Marina wasn't basking in the moment. She was thinking about what would come next, because men like Alexander Volkov didn't just accept defeat. They retaliated. They destroyed. Marina. She turned. James stood in the kitchen doorway, looking deeply uncomfortable but determined. He wants to speak with you, James said quietly. Privately, the kitchen went silent again. David stepped forward. She doesn't have to. It's okay, Marina said, putting a hand on David's arm. I'll hear what he has to say. She followed James to a quiet corner of the restaurant near the private dining room. Alexander was standing by the window, looking out at the city skyline. Without his audience, without his armor of arrogance, he looked somehow smaller, more human. My father was a factory worker, he said, without turning around, his Russian soft, almost contemplative. In Selyabinsk. He died when I was 12, from lung disease. The factory owners wouldn't pay for proper ventilation. I swore I would never be powerless like him. Marina said nothing, waiting. But somewhere along the way, Alexander continued. I became the factory owner, the one who doesn't see the workers, the one who... He trailed off, finally turning to face her. Your grandmother? What was her name? Svetlana Mikhailovna Boriskova, Marina replied. Alexander's eyes widened slightly. Boris Kova... The engineer's widow. Marina nodded slowly. You knew my grandfather. I knew of him. Everyone in certain circles did. Boris Boriskov. He designed safety systems for factories. He fought for worker protections. He was, Alexander paused, choosing his words carefully, eliminated for his trouble. The weight of history hung between them. Generations of pain and struggle compressed into this moment. It became everything he fought against, Alexander said quietly. And I've been speaking his granddaughter like she was nothing. We all make choices, Marina said. Every day, we choose who we want to be. You chose to be someone who measures worth in dollars. I chose to remember that every person I serve has a story, has value, has dignity, regardless of what's in their wallet. Alexander reached into his jacket and pulled out his checkbook. Marina immediately shook her head. No, she said firmly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You can't buy your way out of this. You can't throw money at your conscience and make it disappear. Then what? Alexander asked, and for the first time he sounded genuinely lost. What do you want from me? I want you to remember this feeling, Marina said. This discomfort. This shame. This moment when someone you dismissed as worthless made you see yourself clearly. And the next time you're about to treat someone as less than human because they serve you or work for you or can't match your bank account, I want you to remember that they might be someone's daughter, someone's mother, someone's hope. They might speak your language. They might know your secrets. They might be the one to teach you the lesson you desperately need to learn. She turned to leave, then paused, and Mr. Volkov. That natural order you mentioned? It doesn't exist. We create the order. With every choice, every word, every gesture. Of respect or disrespect, you have the power to create a better order. The question is, will you? She left him standing there, staring out at the city, perhaps seeing it differently for the first time.